Well, welcome everybody. Lovely to have you here this afternoon. It's my pleasure to be with you, and it's certainly my pleasure to welcome and introduce Dr. Anita Levine. My name is Dr. Denise Larson. I'm a professor of counseling psychology here at the University of Alberta, and I'm also the director of research at the Hope Foundation of Alberta. So a few months ago, Dr. Levine contacted me and mentioned her work with Hope and teachers, and she and I have been corresponding for a number of months and looking forward to the opportunity to have her visit us here at the University of Alberta and just spend some time with us at the Hope Foundation of Alberta. Dr. Levine is an assistant professor at SUNY College in Oneida in upstate New York in the elementary education department. Previously, she taught grades 3 to 6 in Texas, Ohio, and even in Pakistan. Her current research interests include comparative international education, stress and coping, hope, and teacher renewal. So it's lovely to have you here with us and to have you share your work with teacher renewal and hope.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone. It is an honor to be here, and especially honor that you have decided to come on a Thursday afternoon. I'm sure you've all spent a very heavy day work, and to come and be here with me to learn a bit about my study on hope and teachers. I want to first start with a quote by Gabriel Marcel, who is a French philosopher, who wrote about hope. This comes from his book, Homo Viator, Man or Human on the Way, a metaphysic of hope. The reason I chose this particular quote is to bring the point out that hope is not some fluffy concept. Hope is not something that, is like a wish or I'm being optimistic. Hope is something more than that. It's a very active process that is within us. That at the moment in which we wish for something or we hope for something, I'll be using those words a bit and you'll start to see the difference, that there's something that we want different than what is in the now, and that there may be this temptation of, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know, there seems to be struggle, could there be something small or something large. In that space of which we begin to doubt, that space in which we begin to have a bit of, I don't know. That is the very moment where hope arises. That is the space where hope emerges. And hope is a very active process. We may not manifest. Our hope may not manifest, but it is an act by which we engage to work towards that which we hope and to battle or combat or to overcome that temptation to slide into despair. Oh, come on. There we go. Hope matters. Insider perspectives on what keeps teachers going in spite of it all. My question, since I work with teachers, is, well, there's a problem. There's a high rate of attrition researchers have known for decades. And it's not just in the United States, it's in Denmark, because a Danish friend of mine and I were talking that the attrition rates when teachers leave the profession are about the same. It's in England, it's in Australia, it's in Canada also. Within the first 3 years, 30% of teachers drop out or leave. By the 5th year, 50% of teachers have gone. Some may move to a different school. For the most part, attrition means leaving the profession. Reported in the literature for decades, reduced coping skills, impaired well-being, psychological feelings of burnout, a sense of hopelessness has been reported. Patricia, one of my participants, also a very dear friend of mine, teaches high school art. In the first few years of when she was teaching in Newark, New Jersey, in inner city, with about 100 students every day, this is what she reported to me. I asked her, what was it like in the beginning? Because she's now in her 10th year at a different school. Why hope? It's well documented for facing life's problems, so to speak. Our challenges, how to cope with stress. Hope has been directly related to quality of life. Many studies on quality of life in the nursing field and also in the counseling field. Unrelenting stress can lead to burnout. And here, definition of burnout by Maslow, one of the key researchers, original researchers, along with Freud and Berger on burnout. It's the sense that one's inner resources are used up in the effort to cope with the unrelenting daily stressors that impact negatively our ability to function. What's interesting, first the symptoms of burnout, and I'll go into what I was just going to say. Here are some of the symptoms reported of burnout. Anger, depression, reduced professional efficacy, which then influences home life. Psychosomatic complaints, emotional distancing, also called with cynicism and depersonalization, pulling back, having disregard now for one's students and colleagues. Disillusionment, why did I ever go into the profession in the first place? You know, these kids, I can't stand it anymore. This is not what I thought it used to be. The paperwork is just massive. This is not what teaching was about. Despair, hopelessness, loss of meaningfulness in one's work and life. The psychosomatic complaints, very, very interesting. I found a dissertation back in 1933 by Frances Ross Hicks called The Mental Life of Teachers. And her research was on the rise of teachers who were being admitted to the hospital for mental health conditions from 1925 to 1930, which I can only surmise, because it's been a while since I found and read her dissertation. It's been a while. I can only surmise it was during the time when the Great Depression was coming into play. There was also the teachers' union. There's a whole host of things in American education that made for stress with teachers. What's fascinating is a rise of teachers in 1925 to 1930 admitted to the hospital for a condition called neurasthenia. So what's neurasthenia? The Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Neurasthenia is a psychological condition or disorder characterized by chronic fatigue and weakness, headaches, insomnia, irritability, generalized aches and pains, believed to result from psychological factors such as depression, emotional stress, or conflict. It's sometimes considered to or identical with chronic fatigue syndrome. It's a term that's no longer used. And I thought, my gosh, this sounds like burnout. Hope. In the literature from psychology, theology, philosophy, and psychiatry, hope is a very complex phenomenon. And I have a few slides here of how hope has been conceived from these various disciplines. We have cognitive, behavioral, affective, personal agency, the sense of transcendence, spirituality. One may or may not be religious to have the sense of transcendence. Relationships, meaning and purpose in life, sense of time based on our experience with the past and the present, a vision of a future uncertain yet desired, and a future we wish to see manifest, time-oriented, active strategy. We have generalized and particular hopes. It does affect our quality of life and ability to cope. That's hope, and the sense of not having hope. Hope, genuine hope, is grounded in one's contextual reality, in the here and the now, not a fantasy of, well, I think this is the way things are. Being embedded in on-the-ground reality, that's where genuine hope emerges and resides, not running away from the situation that we are faced with now. And with hope, one recognizes our desired goals may not occur, but we can still have hope, even more. Some theorists, like Charles Snyder, it's a goal-oriented motivational mechanism. That's also E.J. Corner. Necessary for one's well-being, the quality of life, the belief that things can improve. Even Carl Menninger, back in 1959, believed that hope, an intangible just like faith and love, is a necessary component of what it means to be a human being. And that psychiatrists must study hope. 1959 address in the APA, American Psychological Association, he said in 1959, our cupboards are bare. We've researched everything else, but we have not yet researched hope. And thus began this big explosion over time of hope research. Facing life challenges, And one more. Again, the inherent uncertainty that one's goals will be attained emerges from a present situation that is troubling. Almost like a pebble in one's shoe. It's kind of there. Something there can be very large, it could be very small. It's a situation that's troubling and we want to find a way to fix it, to change, find a solution. It can be either with cancer or something so much as my student is just not getting the concept of division. I've worked and worked and worked with her and she needs to understand it and she's just not getting it. That's a troubling situation. Hope and hopelessness are coexistent. It's not one or the other. Yin and yang, light and dark, male and female. Hope and hopelessness are simultaneous existence, simultaneous phenomenon within each of us. And we can feel hope and hopelessness at the same time. As William Lynch said, it is up to us to make sure, he's a theologian, it is up to us to make sure that the hopelessness does not contaminate our hope. Definition that I've used from Ferran Hirth and Popovich, who are nurse researchers, whose model I used for the study that you'll see a little bit of, the definition of hope, which has taken into account all what you just saw before, all the research from theology, philosophy, psychiatry, and psychology over the years. Their definition of hope is such that it's it's essential experience to being human. It's a way of thinking, feeling, behaving, a way of relating to our world. That hope has the ability to be fluid. We can, if our hope does not occur, we still can have hope. The hope can still be present even when we do not feel hope. Hope is still present. Hope in teachers, what do we know? When it comes to educational research, well, the research is on why teachers leave. We have scads and reams of information about why teachers leave, especially within the first 5 years. And we also have lots of research as to why teachers leave after they've taught 16, 17, 18 years, or getting ready to retire, or they've had enough, the mortgage is paid off, the kids are now out of college, or they've made it through, and now they're ready to leave. Little is known about hope, except just a few researchers, such as Sonia Nieto, did a study on what keeps teachers going. It was part of her project in 2003 in New York, I think it was New York State. Hope was only one portion of her study of a theme that came out. She was not specifically looking for hope. Why mid-career? I wanted to focus on what I call mid-career teachers. You'll see that term also in some of the readings you might do on mid-career. Attrition, as I mentioned, research on why teachers leave tend to be on the beginning phase or nearing the end phase. The U-curve hypothesis is that a lot of teachers leave in the early part. They're young, idealistic, they burn out quickly, they want other options, so there's a lot of leaving in the very beginning. Then as you move down, teachers settle in, they build more skills, they start feeling comfortable with their craft, they develop coping skills with stress, the administration, the paperwork, the testing, the students, the parents, everything that goes with it. They develop what we call the teaching chops, their toolkit, and they start feeling really comfortable. And then as the curve rises again, we hit about 15, 16, 17, 18 years in the profession, and that's when teachers are now thinking of retirement. So there seems to be this so-called U-curve hypothesis. There's many U-curve hypotheses for all kinds of disciplines I found with multiculturalism and such. Sorry, I get on the side. That many leave in the beginning, many leave in the end. We know not that much about those in the middle, because most of the research is on those on the end portions, which is why I chose that mid-group. Between 6, after that 5th year of when the dropout rate is high. So let's get past the 5th year. I want to know about people from their 6th year up to the 15th. That was my cutoff point. So here are my questions. What are their perspectives on hope as that which sustains them in the profession in the face of all the stressors? And then what strategies do they use to nurture that hope? I used the model from nursing because the nursing models, all of them that I looked at, are multidimensional. They all come from, virtually all come from the perspective of looking at those 4 disciplines that I discussed a little bit ago, of psychology, psychiatry, theology, and philosophy. Versus a popular model in psychology just looks from a cognitive level. The nursing models look at emotions and spirituality as well. The model that I chose was developed by nurse researchers Ferran Hirth and Popovich, and I've been in touch with Kay Hirth over the last few years. You'll see the word modified. I took what they consider to be their model of how to approach hope and work with in the palliative nursing field, working with cancer victims, working with anyone and everyone who is in some way, shape, or form in a crisis situation or in a healthcare situation, working with nurses, working with individuals who are facing tremendous challenges in their life physically, which then goes into emotional and spiritual, and then also worked with caregivers. And they also built on the literature that was started actually in the 1980s by a pioneer, Karen Dufault, who did her research on 3-year study on cancer, elderly cancer patients, who developed the first major multidimensional model, and everyone built from that. What Ferran Hirth and Popovich theorized or conceptualized hope is in actually 4 realms. I'll kind of put my hand here, leave that off. What they call the rational thought process, relational relationships, experiential, spiritual, transcendent, temporal. Then 2 hope types, what they consider general hope and particularized hope. That actually comes from Karen Dufault back in the late 70s, early 80s. The rational thought process is what they call the mind of hope. This is more of the psychological theories, where you have cognition, affect, or the emotions, and how that influences behavior, and how behavior influences emotions and thoughts. They looked at what they put together and called the GRACT, goals, having goals, resources, hope being an active one that has to be active in the process of finding solutions, having control in the sense of time is all part of the rational thought process. The reason I have an asterisk next to time is that I do understand that the sense of time, one's past, present, and future, does influence how one thinks about problems and how one will act and make decisions. I decided to take time out, as did Karen Dufault, had time in its own separate category to investigate, because as a classroom teacher, both third through 6th and with adults, teachers are driven by time. We are driven by time. Our life is on the clock all the time. The tests are coming up. We have to do this. We have to do this. So my question was, does time play a factor in one's hope? I wanted to tease that out a little bit. Relational, they call the heart of hope, the importance of relationships, a sense of mutuality. William Lynch, Jesuit theologian, who's also a psychiatrist, wrote a book, The Imagination of Hope, and for him, hope, his theory is hope imagines with. If we need the imagination in order to hope. In fact, for him, wishing begins the hoping process. Experiential, the pain of hope, are the trials in life. Can be big ones, little ones, fat ones, skinny ones, tall ones, short ones, or still whatever we consider to be those roadblocks that we are faced with. And it is with the experiential that we have this dialectic of hope and what we perceive as hopelessness. Wishing and optimism fall by the wayside here because hope acknowledges pain, that things will not always go the way we want them to go. Whereas wishing is rather, oh, I wish for, I wish on the star, I wish that I'll meet a really nice guy, and it's very positive, but I'm not going to do anything about it. Optimism is similar. There's more activity. I will make some strides towards my goal. It's very positive. I will not entertain the idea of anything negative happening. No, don't tell me something bad's going to happen. I want to remain optimistic. That's where hope is different from optimism and wishing. We start with those, we use optimism. It is not the same as hope. Hope acknowledges pain. Hope acknowledges that we may not get what we really need and what we think we need and want, and it may hurt. That won't stop me though. Spiritual transcendent, the soul of hope, the ability to rise above current situations, to see from a larger perspective, can be one's religious faith. It could be someone who can be an atheist and they walk in the woods, and that is their spirituality. Meaning and purpose in life is also part of the spiritual, considered part of transcendence. In a sense, the spiritual aspect, the existentialism, the meaning and purpose in life. And here's temporality, time and hope relationship, what is considered by Ludema Wilmot and Srivastava as a trans-temporal understanding, past, present, and future coalescing. We cannot have the future without the past, and we live in the current moment, visualizing a desired future, and it is that triangulation of our past experiences, the pain, the joy, relationships, successes, failures, whatever it may be, our past, what is going on in the moment, and then looking towards the future, and the future coming back to us and moves us forward to the future. It's as if the future pulls us towards it, that vision. Hope is generated at the interface between the past and the future. I know what it was like before. I know I want it different. I know how I would like to see it look different. I hope for that. Now, here I am in the present. What am I going to do? What will I do to keep my hope strong that I can do that which I want to do, to manifest that vision, that future that is pulling me in the present now towards that imagined future? Two types of hope, generalized and particularized. A general type of hope is valued, but it doesn't have to be very specific. I hope my kids get along. I'm tired of them fighting all the time. I really hope that they start to get along, maybe when they're a little older. Uncertainty, I don't know if they will, but it sure would be nice. Here's one of the statements that I used. I'll get into the methodology in just a moment, then the results. An example of a relational type general hope. Sometimes just being with someone who gets me, listens, and says, "You'll get through this." It's enough to give me the strength to continue. Particularized hope is very personally significant. I will get my dissertation done. Very particular, very time-bound for me. I had to shift it a few times. That's why it's generally time-bound, and it had to shift to, oops, not this semester, maybe next semester, but it will get done. Learning new strategies to teach my subject helps me feel like I can be more effective. Learning new strategies, cognitive, taking action. What can I do with hands-on such? Hopelessness, I'd just like to share, we may know what hope is. Well, in order to know what something is, we have to know what that thing is not. Like, how do we know what light is if we don't know what dark is? So hopelessness, Lynch, theologian, that's constriction of the private imagination. Hopelessness is when one cannot, this is for Lynch, when one cannot imagine beyond what it perceives, beyond the boundaries, the limits in the present moment. I'm hitting up against this boundary and I think that's the end of my world. I stop visualizing, I stop moving beyond what I think can really be possible. The student saying, I just don't get it. I just don't get what it means to reduce fractions. I just don't get it, and I'm never going to get it. Never. We know better, so we as teachers have to help that student or several of our students to think around and beyond that boundary that is causing them to reduce, narrow their imagination of what is they're able to. Thus, it reduces their ability to hope of what is possible. the challenge to not let the imagination close down, that we as teachers actually become hope mongers. The methodology that I used is a mixed methods called Q methodology. It's an approach that focuses on human subjectivity. It's designed to get at individual subjective viewpoints on any given topic in a very systematic manner. Correlates their perspectives, correlates persons' perspectives, and then looks for themes between these perspectives. So how did I go about doing that? I had 25 participants. I chose them based on the needs of my study, the parameters of teaching between 6 to 15 years. Grades K-12, all subjects, rural, urban, suburban, Ohio. I was living in Ohio at the time, New Jersey and Maine. Both genders, ages such and such, and I had mostly whites, European Americans, and 2 African Americans. I could only get who was willing to participate. I had massive search and only 25 agreed. I had 25. That was great. I used for my study, there are 40 statements based on the HOPE model. And if anyone's interested, I have my contact information afterwards, and I can send you what those statements were and what that looked like. Statements are grounded in the literature, reviewed by Kay. Final wording, the participants on the focus group looked at, yeah, this sounds like, yeah. They had no idea that it had to do with these 5 categories, rational, relay. They did not know, that was not the point. I wanted them to look at statements that I knew were part of this model and to see if the statements rang true for them in teacher talk. The way that it worked is that they sorted 40 statements in a what's called a forced distribution. Absolutely most like my perspective, they were forced to put the cards, the absolute ones on the ends here that they most agreed with, like my perspective of what kept their hopes, what nurtured their hope in the face of stressors on the job, to absolutely not like my perspective. And they did not like that for the most part because they wanted to put a whole bunch of cards all here, just like on a Likert scale. Oh, I'm going to just mark 5s and 4s and everything. That doesn't tell us anything. That doesn't tell us why they chose what they chose. So they are forced to determine between 40 statements which ones do you most align with, that you agree with, that nurtures your hope, and that you disagree with in that continuum. It was face-to-face. I also had an online version. And then I interviewed all but 3 on the phone, face-to-face and on the phone. Some of the sample questions were, and you'll see in the parentheses, like that would be the relational part of the hope theory, G for generalized hope, P for particularized. So the first one has to do with time, very specific, because it's short to long-term goals, looking from the present to the future, building those small steps of success. Feeling taken for granted, prayer helps me get through the day. I had a number of participants who absolutely, that was on their absolute plus side. That's what kept their hope going. And then just being with someone who gets me, as I shared with before. Factor analysis is part of the program that I used. That was a statistical portion. The rest was all qualitative inquiry, qualitative method. 4 factors or themes emerged. The title for each does not fully, I have to say, it doesn't fully express what emerged. It was the best, the closest that I could get to with the statements that kept coming up, the interviews with everyone that I had, that these were the themes that seemed to emerge for these 4 different types of hope nurturing, types of teachers that lean on certain strategies and certain perspectives that renew them. Making a difference through advocacy, where most everyone out of the 25 were aligned with this particular first theme. Faith-based calling to teach, professional autonomy and respect was necessary, and total reliance on God. That was one person, male African American, and he was the only one that was there, and you'll see some of the statements. 15 teachers, the dominant processes, rational, which are your affective, cognitive, behavioral, making steps, taking care of things, looking for options, finding ways, solutions, relationships, and time. This type of individual, this type of teacher with a type of what nurtures their hope, needing successes, being an advocate for students constantly over and over and over. This keeps me going. Absolutely, I'm the voice for my students who have no voice. And there are very many examples that I could share if you're interested. Showing care through meaningful conversations, really loving when the kids, some of them came and spoke with them and hung out with them, because they, as some of my participants said, some of my students come from a really bad life situation. I want them to know that I care about them, and these conversations mean a lot to me, and I know it means a lot to them. Helping students reimagine their possibilities. Planting seeds with students, planting seeds. We say that a lot as teachers. I'm planting seeds with my students of possibility. One day the material will click. In this case, with this group, one day the material will click had to do with the subject matter. They may not get it now, but one day I'm sure it'll come together, or maybe after they leave high school it'll start to make sense for them. What they dismissed was spirituality and religion, need for control, acknowledgement from their principal. A point is that all my participants said that they were Christian. I didn't anticipate that. I'd never thought of it. Some of them were still practicing. Some walked away, but they all came from Christian orientation. Some of them dismissed that because of separation of church and state, and others said, I go to church, however, when it comes to nurturing me in the workplace, I don't rely, that's my private life. It's separate from my work life. The second factor, of which there are 7 teachers, 1 African-American woman who is an urban teacher, faith-based calling to teach. The term call to teach, I'm called, kept rising repeatedly for these particular individuals in the interviews. There's a reason for everything. Now, reason for everything was not seen as passivity, like I'm just going to kick back and hang out. Oh, there's a reason, God will provide. No, it wasn't quite like that. It's possible that this happened because I needed to learn something to help me with my students coming in next year. There's a reason that this happened. So I will not dismiss it. And also did strengthen religious beliefs for some. Religious faith, prayer, and spiritual beliefs were high on the list for this group. And teaching as a calling, being called to do God's will. I heard that repeatedly from minimum 2, 3 out of the 7 teachers. I feel that I'm called to do Christ's work. I'm called to do God's work. It's God's will that I'm here as a teacher. Collegial relationships are very important for this group. Vital for coping and hoping, working together, visioning together, working on curriculum together, whatever it might have been. Someone who gets them, that could be a colleague, but generally outside of school. Friends and family hanging out together, going on trips, rejuvenation. And then the being patient, they said, no, I'm not going to be patient, I'm going to be active. Now what's interesting is that the African-American woman, she, however, said, yes, I need to be patient because things unfold in their own time, like student learning. However, I'm going to be very active while I'm waiting for that to unfold. Going to conferences, she writes papers, she gets grants, she does all kinds of stuff while she keeps her faith embedded in God that things will work out because she's letting time unfold itself and she takes charge at the same time. The third group were 2 of my teachers, and they were both between 40 and 49, so they're pretty veteran teachers teaching between 12 to 15 years. These were the top 2 things that came out all the time out of their mouth. I need respect, and I need to be able to have control over what I'm doing. It drives me nuts when I do not have control. Period, end of story, unlike a number of the others in that other group, the first group especially, first and second. They use the word control and autonomy simultaneously. I know those words actually mean something different. They were used having control, I'm taking charge of it, autonomy, that I can do this on my own. It was interesting that both of them said the word, they flipped it back and forth. They didn't even think that there might be a difference. It meant the same to them. Doing things outside of work, supportive colleagues, the need for the principal's support. I heard some horror stories. Those of you who are teachers may have heard of horror stories too, with principals and superintendents and being very disrespectful and uncooperative, supportive network, and that life has value and worth. Let me go back. a little bit previous. You notice, I'm sorry, rational, the doing, the relationships. The spiritual transcendent did not necessarily mean God at all, because they both said, no, it's not God. It had to do with having meaning and purpose in life. This is my purpose. This brings me joy and peace. This renews my hope because I know my life has meaning. And the one person, the African American, he has total reliance on God. Everything, if you notice the hope processes, the spiritual transcendent, and time. Everything was about God. Everything. He did not preach, taught in a public school, still does. I know what school he's in. And they have very poor kids to extremely wealthy kids at that school. It's a real mix. Everything goes back to God for him. He's called to teach. He's doing God's will. As he said, he relies on his colleagues, not for stress, not for coping, just for working together. And he explained that people come and go, but God does not. He gave me a few stories. He does believe that his teaching efforts make a difference. They will bring about a better future. And in this case, the one day that his students will connect learning is not related to the subject matter like a few in the other group. Although some of them said, I hope my students get something out of this to be a better human being. For him, he was specific on that point, that what he wants his students, he teaches 4th grade, to get is that they can learn no matter what life throws them, because those are the students who come from very troubled homes with very low self-esteem. He wants his students that when years later they will be able to be happy individuals, or at least be able to function as successful members of society. So it was not that they'll be able to do division later on in life, even though that's important to know how to do certain skills. And in this, relationships with colleagues, it was only in terms of nurturing his hope. That is with God. Between factors 2 and 4, very similar with faith, prayer, doings, God's will. Teaching as a calling. The key difference is this: the relationships for the other individuals, that type of teacher, equal balance between God and faith, family, and friends, whereas he relied solely on God to nurture his hope. I figure 1 person out of 25 might be a lone voice in the wilderness. However, 1 out of 25 is still 1 person. And if there's 100 people, that's 4. And if there's 1,000, how much is that? 40? 400? So that type of person. I don't teach math anymore. Consensus statements means the statements that virtually all of them agreed on in terms of the factors, the themes that came forward. Important that I have a supportive network of friends and families. There's that relationship with loved ones, people who got them, who understood, the go-to people to support their hope, renew their hope. And those few uplifting experiences they have each year with a student that, this is what it's all about. I've had a really tough semester with my kids. At the end of the year, it's driving, I don't know if I can go on. Wow. That just made it all worthwhile. And the teachers, almost all of them, lived for that moment. That nurtured their hope and helped them to cope. I want you to note that hope is perceived as that which sustained and was a coping strategy and hope nurturing strategy simultaneously. It turned out that general hopes became very particular hopes. And then when certain of their very specific hopes didn't materialize the way they wanted or right away, the particular hope, well, she didn't get the division problem yet. But one day she will. I'll just keep working. So that particular hope would then shift into something general again, would flow back and forth. The participants, all of them had a hard time defining hope when we got to it. And when they began to discuss hope, it became both that which kept them going and a strategy, these strategies all at the same time. They couldn't separate them out very well. It was quite interesting. In the hope talk, Joseph Godfrey, the hope was a noun, verb, and adjective. I hope. I have a hope, I am hoping. Different ways of talking about hope that we do simultaneously. What saps hope? I wanted to share that with you. Apathy of students. The standards are, especially in the United States, always changing. It's nuts. It's crazy. It's, as my friend calls it, de-hopifying. We are being de-hopified as teachers. When testing results, and these are quotes, when testing results don't show the hard work that my students and I did, it's very demoralizing, depletes my hope. Fear of losing a job because I have to pay my students' college bills. I am in a mortgage. I can't afford to lose my insurance. Being around colleagues who are negative, there's an actual term for it called burnout contagion. It's an actual term. That burnout, that hopelessness, despair does like a disease, it's like a virus. And as Lynch had said, our task is not to let our hopelessness contaminate our hope, because we have them both at the same time. State and federal government, our departments of ed, it's going on right now. We're going to be evaluated almost solely on our student test scores, at the end of the year test scores. How effective we are as teachers. And now in the state of New York, principals will be evaluated by the test scores. That just was passed in New York a few weeks ago. Doing additional things, and some teachers really love doing this, like being in the union. Some teachers love that. Some teachers really love being on committees, and for a number of others, they said, oh no, that would just make me go over the edge. Too much. I already do enough. And I'm not being recognized for it by my principal. Why am I always just told what I should be doing more instead of being told you're doing a great job? The African American woman, she's been dismissed by her white colleagues. She told me she was punched in the face by a student because she was black, even though there are a number of other black students at her school. Most of the teachers are white at her school, which has to do with this history of American education, how it developed in our country. She's ignored by her white colleagues. Comments have been made to her, and so what she has to do to keep her hope strong as an African American woman, because she was clear about that, and as a human being, is she goes into what she calls her prayer closet. She shuts the door, she takes out her Bible, and she reads. And she also walks outside the building and she prays on a daily basis. I also have a white colleague who she prays. She takes her Bible out and she goes next door to her colleague who also has the same belief in the public school, and when the doors are shut, they take out their Bible and they pray together to renew their hope, to give them some solace and calm themselves down. Those are the factor 2 people, the faith-based calling to teach people, by the way. Increasing workload. This came from an interview. I can't stand the paperwork, it's killing me. So she actually moved down from 10th grade language arts to 12th grade language arts down to 10th grade or 8th, 9th grade, and she said the paperwork is so much less. She is so happy now. She said she couldn't have survived had she gone another year. So she made the change, and she's much better. And change is what's considered best practice. Being told by those who are not in the education field, oh, this is what's best practice. We ran the study and this is what makes for teacher effectiveness. Do this now, do this now. They're like, wait a minute, what about our knowledge? We're professionals and we're being ignored, our voice is being dismissed. What we know to work with my particular student, I know what works with so and so and so and so. Don't tell me I have to do this now because now you're going to test me on my effectiveness because I'm not using this. Very frustrating, depletes their hope. Lack of control, no recognition of support, focus on getting students to pass a standardized test. I don't know what it's like here in Canada, but it's big in the US. So, what sustains hope? Taking into account our reality on the ground, hope is real. It's realistic. Because when all the teachers said, I have to know what my situation really is, because I cannot live in fantasy. They were very clear about hope not being fantasy. They were actually talking about that. That was not even one of the statements that they sorted, a hope statement. Hope as that which sustains is existential because it provides them. They feel that they have meaning and purpose in life, and that renews their hope. They did share that for them, hope was something intrinsic to them. It was their essential selfness, who they were as human beings, which was part of their identity in a way, which is an interesting line of inquiry, part of their identity as being an educator. And purpose in life, working with the parents, working with the students, and the community at large. Vision for a desired future. They wanted things that were better for the school district, better for their students. They didn't know if it would ever happen. They were still hopeful. Quote unquote, they were hopeful, their words. Relationships, and then the uplifting experiences. I may never see that this will happen, like with my one participant, I may never see that this will happen, but that doesn't matter. I'm still going to keep on doing what I'm doing. Because I know that this makes a difference. Because one time, this was, 3 people shared this, a similar story. 3 of them did say that, I know what I do makes a difference, even though I may never see it, because last year, a student of mine who I had 5 years before came to speak with me to say, thank you so much. You really made a difference in my life. One of them said they were on the street going to a store. They ran into so-and-so who just graduated high school. I'm so glad you were my teacher. Thank you so much. You really helped me. Really, if it weren't for you, I don't think I would have made it. And I have a personal story that happened to me teaching 5th grade back in Ohio. There was a student. She was having a really difficult time, very bright young woman. I just loved her. I mean, she wouldn't even get out of the car. And this is a 5th grader. By the end of the year, they all wrote me stuff, cards, and because I was leaving. And she wrote me a card that said, sorry, thank you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have made it. I did not know that. And her parents had told me often, thank you, you know, she really means a lot to her. We go to synagogue together, she'd want to sit next to me or, you know, give big hugs. And she matured into a really amazing young woman. It's like, wow. Still. Envisioning, so hope building strategies. Envisioning, there's that visioning again. Can start as a wish and then it becomes something active oriented. Belief in that our efforts do make a difference. These build hope. These are strategies to build and renew our hope. Again, the reliance on whatever it is that means whatever to you, whether it's walking in nature, that's what does it for me. Whether it is a spiritual practice such as yoga, meditation, lighting candles, reading literature that is inspiring, being with others in a faith-based scenario, having control and autonomy in one's classroom, in one's decision-making abilities as a professional, that builds hope. That's a strategy. Relationships, celebrating student successes came out very loud and clear. When the teachers saw their student having even a little bit of success, that student felt fantastic, the teacher felt fantastic, and that feedback system of the teacher felt successful because the student was successful, and that flowed back and forth. It became that. Hope Monger is by Herbert Cole. Hope Monger, absolutely. From his book, I Won't Learn From You and Other Creative Maladjustments. That's from chapter 1 or 2. He speaks about being a hope monger, and it's in the dictionary as well. That we are those who promote hope in others. That is our role as a teacher. He's coming from a teacher's perspective in this case as well. These are Herbert Cole's an educator and his experience as a teacher in an urban situation, working with kids who did everything in their power not to learn. It's a great book called Creative Maladjustment. I Won't Learn From You, Creative Maladjustment. Encouraging students to dream beyond the world in which they live, to dream, to envision different possibilities. collegial support, authentic administrator respect. Limitations of my study, it was mostly whites, mostly European Americans. I could only, don't tell anybody this, but I begged for participants. I went to my friends, I went to the different universities, I went to my superintendents, I went to principals, we got some people, and okay, so it was mostly who I could get. I did not have many, that happens I think. Those, how many of you are working on your dissertations right now? If you're trying to get a focus group, it was really challenged. I only had 2 urban school teachers. I had quite a few suburban and rural, but only 2 urban. I would have liked to have had more. Gender imbalance. I did not consider religious orientation. Would it have made a difference being Muslim, Jewish, Sikh, Baha'i, anything other than Christianity? I don't know. Never considered it. It was not in any of the teacher attrition literature that it had to do with religion at all. So it never dawned on me whatsoever. Some implications: administrators need to work on their interpersonal skills, because administrators need to be mindful that they themselves are leaders of hope. They themselves are hope mongers. Their staff relies on them, and whatever the vision of that administrator is kind of leaks through to their staff. And if the principal is not a nice person, then there's not going to be a lot of hope in that workplace. A lot of literature to support that as well, mind you. The recognition and support of teachers' spiritual needs, I thought of it in terms of wellness, like a teacher renewal program. Because when I asked the teachers, what is your dream support system? That's something I had them all write out. What's your dream support system? One of them was having a renewal retreat where they could get together with their colleagues outside of the school situation and talk and share ideas. Almost like being at a conference, but in their home area, in a really nice place where they can kick back and just enjoy themselves, where they didn't have to grade papers, but talk about ideas, camaraderie. Utilize multidimensional hope models, because those researchers who do investigate teachers, or actually there's a bit of research on students and hope, a little bit on teachers and hope, very, very, very little, mostly on students. The model that's used is not anything from the nursing field at all. It's all about goals and reaching goals. If you can reach your goal or think you can reach your goal, you have high hope. If you don't reach your goal, then you have low hope. You'll find ways to do it, but nothing at all about meaning in life, spirituality, nothing else other than willpower and how to manifest goals. So I advocate for the use of multidimensional hope model in educational research. Some lines of inquiry: getting administrators to look at what do they think keeps their teachers going, keeps teachers' hopes going, to run a study with them and then compare the two, and perhaps do interventions at schools between what the administrator, the principal, superintendent think and what the teachers are thinking, and see where common ground might be and see where areas might need to be for working together. That could be interesting. Second career teachers are those who come to teaching as a second career. I had 2 of them in my study, and they had some really interesting things to say. Real interesting things, completely different outlook. Still the same things of what kept their hope going, just a different outlook. It was really fascinating. Teacher career cycle, where a teacher is in their, what's called the career cycle of when they first start, and then to their 5th year, their 8th year, their 12th year. How many years in service does that affect coping strategies? Could I tease that out a little more? Look at that differently. I'd like to look at more of teacher burnout and hope from an international comparison. There is research done on teacher burnout, mostly in Western Europe. There's a huge book on teacher burnout, international comparisons. It's only on Western Europe and North America, and Canada, a little bit of Australia, nothing in Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Asia, nothing. There was no talk about hope, it was only on burnout. So that would be interesting to look at that. Resilience, teacher resilience work from a hope perspective. That would be really fascinating, because I haven't seen that yet. It might be there, I just would need to really dig into it more. And then teacher renewal program. Or anyone, this would be future lines of inquiry for anyone who might be interested in this. This photo comes from, I was in New Mexico. My buddy and I were traveling around. We went through a town called Hope. And a store, it's called the Hope Store and Social Club. So I thought that was perfect for what is Hope all about. The store, which you pull out our little things to keep us off going, and the social club, don't forget that. Then a few of the references. Thank you. And if there's my email if you wish, like I send you the PowerPoint, any questions. Now the time is for you of any questions if you wanted to.
I'm looking at the time, Anita, and we told people 4:30 to
5:30.
So it may be that some folks need to move on. You've got other commitments, and if so, please feel free to leave. But for those of you who are able to stay and might want to speak with Anita, feel welcome to stay. I think you've got time to spend some time with folks. And I just want to thank you so very much for being here with us. As you're talking, I'm just drawn to the awareness that you're really breaking new ground for us in terms of opening up the study of hope within the teaching profession and encouraging us to really look at that closely and giving us some very good reasons to do so.
Oh, thank you.
And for bringing us, because my discipline is counseling psychology. I'm a former classroom teacher, but it's a long time since I've done that work. For bringing those hope stories for teachers forward and reminding us about those realities. And I think really for me, pinpointing sources, ideas where hope can be found for teachers who are working on the educational landscape. So I want to extend my thanks. I know others will have gotten other important aspects from the talk, but that was a really important piece that you brought to us. So my
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. And those who need to go, we understand.
Well, I hope you came away with something, a little more than when you first arrived. Thanks for showing up. I appreciate you being here. It's an honor. And I'm here if you want, yes.
I taught in Chicago in inner city schools for 10 years, and then the rest of my career has been here in Canada. And what strikes, and I would say most of my experience with Chicago schools, there wasn't much hope.